The Commanders, their big moves this offseason was getting rid of Taylor Heineke and riding the ship with Sam Howell this year. They also hired Eric Bieniemy.
Yeah.
And did not pick up Chase Young's fifth-year option. Thought that was kind of questionable, but whatever. So Commanders, as we start with the NFC. In the NFC East, the Commanders, who are projected most likely to finish last in this division outside of maybe the Giants. Commanders, their big addition, Eric Bieniemy.
Yeah, this was one of the weirdest additions because they added Eric Bieniemy and gave him like head coaching control of the offense. And they just took that like ability for Riverboat Ron to like either like go for it, and they gave final say to Eric Bieniemy. There's like mixed reviews of him coming out of training camp, and I don't know how much of this is actual like players like upset with him, and I don't know how much of it is just a media narrative around Eric Bieniemy because it's what people have said about him in the past. But we're about to actually find out, does Bieniemy have the ability to be a great head coach? Is he a product of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes really driving that offense together? So we're about to find out, but I do think the Commanders are going to be the worst team in that division because they have the worst quarterback right now. You got rid of Taylor Heineke. He's now projected to ball out in Atlanta. I don't know if he's starting there or not. And then you have Sam Howell at quarterback. And
Nobody
for me,
knows who that
Sam
is.
Howell, it's just like, ugh.
We don't know. We don't know. We have no idea. And then we have the Giants. Giants' big move this offseason was drafting Jalen Hyatt, who's looked promising, and signing Darren Waller to make up for their weapons. I think they also signed Bobby Okereke as well on the defensive side.
Shout out
to Bobby Okereke. And then second year with Brian Daboll. Fantastic last year. Giants had a lot of one-score wins. They finished 9-7-1. They had a tie in there. Made the playoffs. They beat the Vikings in round one, and then came in, ran into the Eagles. Eagles just were no match. Eagles just absolutely annihilated them. But their biggest issue last year was weapons. They got Darren Waller, who I think will be, as long as he stays healthy, a good weapon for him. I think Daniel Jones will like that sort of tight end, someone that can move the field a little bit for him. Saquon, he signs a one-year deal with them. Jalen Hyatt, we'll see what we get out of him. But Giants, overall sentiment for me is they had a lot of one-score wins last year. I think Brian Daboll's a great coach, but can they retain that same amount of luck? We'll see. I think they should regress and maybe not have a winning season. I'd say they're like between the 6 to 8 win range, if I were to guess. I don't trust Daniel Jones, and I feel like a lot of their luck last year was just what it sounded like, just with luck. So I don't know how I feel with them.
Yeah, for me, the Giants are a team. You mentioned it. Added Darren Waller, drafted Jalen Hyatt in the draft. Also added some pieces on defense. So I think that defense will still be there, competitive, but I don't think the offense is suddenly going to go from a one-score offense to blowing people out. I think Darren Waller, ever since he got paid, has kind of been on and off the field, especially when it comes to injuries. So I need to really see that he can stay healthy for me to believe in them. And then also Saquon had been hurt the last few years, and I hate to judge a team based off of injury history, but you have to take it into account when you're trying to predict a season and what's going to happen. And I think Saquon had a lot of carries last year, was able to stay healthy. And he really carried that offense in the run game, and the pass game was a lot of passes to Saquon, like when they would beat the Commanders in those close games that they had battling for the second place in that division, or third place in that division. And then also Daniel Jones, how is he going to be able to make the reads this year? He was a guy who wasn't good until his fifth year, and he still threw less touchdowns than Russell Wilson did in a horrible year for Russ when people were dragging him up and down the carpet. Still a big physical runner. I think they'll upset some teams again, but similar to the Titans, they're just not dynamic enough on offense. And then you can't trust Daniel Jones.
Yep, that's what it ultimately comes down to. And then the other two teams they got to deal with is the Cowboys. We'll start with them.
Yeah.
What happened last year? Had a really good season. They were 12-5. Dak Prescott was hurt for a portion of the season. Cooper Rush stepped in, played pretty well for him, won them some games. And then this offseason, in the playoffs, they did lose to the 49ers. Zeke Elliott having that center call, final play of the game. Just hilarious.
Yeah.
Typical Cowboys playoff woes. And then this offseason, they went out and got Brandon Cooks. They moved on from Zeke Elliott after a long run there. And then outside of that, Cowboys look like they're running it back. They did lose Kellen Moore. They replaced him with Brian Schottenheimer, who was the OC for the Seahawks with Russ in 2019. I feel like their offense could take a step back just as far as their play calling. Brian Schottenheimer's kind of the opposite of Kellen Moore. Not really a running gun guy. Definitely more of a check down, run the football sort of offense. And with Tony Pollard and Deuce Vaughn, I think they should be a formidable offense. That offensive line is taking a step back. And then on the other side of the ball, defense should be just fine. They got Micah Parsons. They got Leighton Vander Esch. They got Trayvon Diggs, who just got paid. So I think their defense is going to be the highlight for this team. Should still be in the mix in the NFC. I think they'll probably still finish second.
Yeah, I think they'll finish second, and it really does come down to that offense because I think when you look at the Eagles' offensive weapons, the Cowboys just don't stack up. The backfield, you could kind of argue it, but Eagles still have the better offensive line, better wide receiving core, better tight ends with Dallas Goedert. And I think with Brian Schottenheimer, what they're trying to do with Dak is they're like, okay, we tried kind of this gunslinger offense with Kellen Moore, and it forced Dak into a lot of interceptions, a lot of dumb interceptions too. It's not like they were just like unlucky picks for Dak Prescott. And then there are some games you can point to last year with Dak, like Jacksonville, where it's a game they could have won the division if they won that game, and Dak inevitably throws an interception to give the Jaguars an opportunity to win and inevitably win that game. And then you look at the 49ers game, Dak just needed to make a play for them to win that game, and he wasn't able to do it. They're still unable to run the football. They weren't able to do it with Zeke and Tony Pollard. I don't think it's going to take a step forward with Deuce Vaughn and Tony Pollard. We'll see how good he is coming out of the draft. And then my thing with the Cowboys too is we've been talking about how good this offensive line is since DeMarco Murray and Tony Romo were in the backfield. So it's like, okay, we've been talking about how good that offensive line is for like 10 years now. It's deteriorated little by little each year. Dak doesn't have as much time to throw. And then how big of a loss will Dalton Schultz be at the beginning of the year where we're trying to find a connection with those rookie tight ends? How good will they be in the pass blocking game? So there's a lot of question marks for the Dallas Cowboys. I think the NFC is still weak enough, though, that they will be a wild card team, potentially win a playoff game. But I think divisional round is still as far as they go in the ceiling on that team because Mike McCarthy, he's just not that dude.
You're just not that dude. Unlike Nick Sirianni, Eagles, maybe you heard of them last year. What happened last year? Well, the year before last year, they made the playoffs despite the fact that they were transitioning from Carson Wentz. Jalen Hurts looked good. They got A.J. Brown. And then last year, they were the best team in football the entire season.
Yes, they were.
Finished 14-3. Jalen Hurts got banged up at the end of the season. Got to see Gardner Minshew a little bit. Going to the playoffs, everyone expected them to be a one and done. They went out and beat the Giants. They went out and beat the 49ers and then played pretty damn near close to perfect against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Came up short. It happens. It's the Super Bowl. It's a dynasty you're running into. It's okay. What happened this offseason? They moved on from Miles Sanders. They replaced him with D Swift and Rashard Penny. I like that, honestly. I think that's an upgrade overall. Their offensive line is still the best in football. Their weapons, A.J. Brown, still a great wide receiver. Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert still there. And defensively, they went after even more Georgia players. They basically have the Georgia defense. They got Jalen Carter, who looks to be a wrecking ball for this team.
That pick made Micah Parsons physically ill, though. Like, he was doing a live while the draft was happening. And as soon as they drafted Jalen Carter, he was like, he just fucking sat back in his chair and he's like, this makes me sick. The Cowboys really wanted Jalen Carter in that draft. Eagles were able to come up there with the Saints pick, I believe.
Yeah, the Saints pick from last year. Yep.
Yeah, and then they take Jalen Carter. So Javon Hargrave is out. No problem. Jalen Carter comes in. And then some of the rookies last year really need to step up and play well on that defensive line, but they still have a lot of depth there. They still have the leadership of Jason Kelsey on that team. And then Nick Sirianni still is a dog at head coach. He is the guy that puts systems in place that are easy to understand and will make it easy for Jalen Hurts to thrive in. He's the guy who's talking about growing our roots. People are like, what is this guy talking about? Manure and roots. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I see. He built a badass defense and a badass offensive line. And then Jalen Hurts, you can argue he's the best quarterback in the NFC. And I think with how weak the NFC is right now, I think they have probably the second best roster compared to the 49ers. However, they have the Jalen Hurts advantage, and they're probably going to get home field.
100%. Their biggest concerns will be how do they adjust losing both their offensive coordinator and their defensive coordinator. OC went to Indianapolis. We talked about that. And then the defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, going to the Cardinals. I think they'll be fine, but I think early on, maybe they start off a little clunky, as Super Bowl teams do, like the Chiefs. So they'll be fine. They'll still be, I think they should still win the division. And if they don't, they'll still be in the playoffs one way or another. I think they should beat the Cowboys out for that division, but they are probably the number one contender in the NFC with the least amount of questions.